What's up, everybody? We got some breaking news, and that is Nate Diaz will be taking on Jorge Masvidal in a professional boxing match at 175 pounds at the Kia Forum in Englewood, California, June 1st of this year. Guys, this is exciting. And I know a lot of people are going to kind of have that reaction that's like, this is dumb. We wanted to see this in the UFC. We wanted this. We wanted that. But I'm going to tell you why this is really awesome, right? Obviously, when it's in the UFC and it's under their banner, everything seems to be bigger. Everything seems to be a little bit more exciting. But let's call this what this is, guys. This is a fun match that's going to have a fun build-up that is going to play off of where both guys are at in their career, right? I know that I had actually said on my channel, I thought that we were going to get a rematch between Diaz and Masvidal, but I thought that maybe there was a shot we could see this a while back before when all this UFC 300 main event circulation was going on and they were trying to build the card. I had said, I feel like this is a matchup the UFC might look to book. However, I think this is the next best option. And I know a lot of people are going to be critical, like, who cares? It's boxing and blah, blah, blah. Both of these guys are a lot older in their careers, guys. Like what we've seen from Nate Diaz the last time he was in the UFC against Tony Ferguson, we could see he dramatically slowed down, right? I know that maybe there were some questions as to how serious he took the camp, knowing he was coming in against Khamzat Chimaev. He didn't want that fight to begin with. He didn't want to help build Khamzat, all those different things. But what we've seen is Nate is definitely a lot older. The reaction time has slowed down. The movement, his hands still look kind of quick, but the movement is very much labored. With all due respect, I'm a gigantic Nate Diaz fan, in case you can't see, but I'm just calling it what it is. And then on the other side of the party here, we have Jorge Masvidal. And what we know about Jorge, he's a guy that likes to talk, right? He's pretty good. He understands the game, right? He stepped away for a while, came back into the UFC, and almost reinvented himself. And how he did that was growing his hair out, playing off the Scarface Tony Montana vibe, and coming in there and knocking people out and talking a big game and going in there and backing it up, taking a little bit of what Conor McGregor was doing. And there he is today, Jorge Masvidal, the MMA Hour, talking basically like, I'm going to break your face, Nate. Now at this point, it's like, okay, like first of all, it's boxing, it's not MMA. But at the same time, I'm happy for both of these guys because I do believe that Jorge's still under contract with the UFC. He's mentioned before that he's kind of worked with them to figure out a way for him to still box and do these other things. Guys, I know people want to see these guys compete in the UFC. They are past their primes, clearly, right? They've slowed down a lot. The movement is not the same. They are still skilled. They are still talented. But it just isn't the same. And what I like about this being a boxing match, if we remember their MMA fight, what was the difference in the matchup? The clinch work with the elbows, the knees, and the kicks of Jorge Masvidal was ultimately the difference between these guys, right? We know Nate's durable. We know he's tough. He has good submission skills. He has good jiu-jitsu. His hands are decent. But there was always a gap between these two when it came to the overall art of striking, right? Jorge is more of a Muay Thai guy that kind of combines the boxing along with it. Tori has more arsenal. He has a bigger arsenal. He has more tools in the toolbox that he was able to put on display in that first fight against Nate Diaz. But in all fairness, that Masvidal that we saw at UFC 244 when these guys fought the first time, that was one of the best versions of, I think, a fighter that we've seen in quite some time in the UFC in terms of just the overall striking. Like, I know Nate isn't the most elusive guy, and he's there to be hit, but that Masvidal that night, that was peak performance Masvidal. That's where we were talking after that fight. We're like, we need him in there against Conor McGregor, which, by the way, is one of the biggest fumbles I think the UFC has made. They've had a lot of success with Conor McGregor, but not having Masvidal versus McGregor in their primes, I feel like that was a big missed opportunity. But at the end of the day, here we are. This is all about these guys still being able to get in there and compete without putting themselves in there with these young, hungry guys in MMA who are so well-rounded to where Masvidal does have pretty underrated takedown defense. He does have good overall striking. It's not to say that you couldn't put Jorge in there with a ranked welterweight and he couldn't do okay. Like, that's not, that's not what I'm saying at all. Like, I do think that there's still a chance. But let's be honest with what it is, guys. Both of these guys are still welterweights, right? That's what they would be if they went back to the UFC. If we look at that division, like, Kevin Holland was a back-end ranked guy in the welterweight division. Are we picking either one of these guys to beat Kevin Holland? In MMA, I don't know if we are. I don't know if we are, right? That's for you to kind of decide. Feel free to comment below. But I just think this boxing match overall is fun. It's fun. It gives both guys the opportunity to have a really good chance in this matchup. Because what we have said, I actually believe, guys, I think Nate Diaz is going to win this. Because what we've seen from Masvidal is, yes, he does have good striking. Yes, he does have good hands. He is fast. And he is very elusive. The problem with Masvidal, his stance is very Muay Thai-esque. He's very tall in his stance. He's very upright. Obviously, it's MMA. It's different. He's used to throwing elbows, knees, and kicks. But I'm going to be curious to see kind of how he adjusts his approach a little bit because Masvidal does have a good jab. He is known for having really good striking. He does have good hands. But Nate Diaz, we saw, again, you have to remember, guys, like I thought he didn't look honestly that great against Jake Paul. But we have to remember, Paul's way north of 200 pounds, right? And that boxing match was at 185, which Jake was clearly the bigger guy. He has way more power than Masvidal as well, I would say. I think Jake Paul has ridiculous power in his hands. That's not to say he's the most technical boxer, but Jake Paul can fight. He can definitely box, and he has legit power in his hands. Now, with Nate, we saw Nate is still very durable. That's one of his most reliable things. And it's not like everyone makes it sound like, well, Nate's just this moving heavy bag. It's like, that's not what it is. Like, Nate's fighting style is revolving around, fighting behind that high guard, moving forward, pushing the pace, not giving you that room to breathe. When he goes in there against Masvidal in a boxing match, I think Jorge's honestly overlooking Nate Diaz. And I know that he's, in terms of this boxing, because what Jorge sees it as is, oh, I was piecing him up on the feet. I was destroying him. This is going to be that. I don't have to worry about the ground game. I don't have to worry about this. But what you do have to worry about is the gloves are a little bit bigger. And what we saw Nate do to Jake Paul, I think we're going to see a very different kind of game plan. And it's not to say that Masvidal can't hurt Diaz because we saw him do it obviously in the first match. We saw Jake Paul drop Diaz in a boxing match. But I would be willing to bet you that Jake Paul has more power in his hands than Jorge Masvidal. Now, in terms of the technicalities and the fight IQ and all those different things, that definitely goes to Masvidal. Now, we have never actually seen, we've heard about Masvidal's boxing. We have, Tyron Woodley. Guys have been on the record saying how good of a boxer Gamebred actually is. But until we actually see him in an actual boxing ring against a high-level guy, and obviously Nate's not technically a professional boxer. He does have a professional boxing match. He's sparred with pros throughout his career. I think this is going to be kind of tough for Jorge because without those kicks, without the clinch, without the knees, Masvidal doesn't have the best gas tank, right? He's explosive. He's twitchy. He does have good power. But with Nate, the strategy that he used against Jake Paul, I can see that being a problem for Masvidal. And another thing to note, this is 10 rounds. This is a 10-round boxing match. So we know how this story goes where, yes, in boxing, it's 3-minute rounds. It's not 5. So yes, it is shorter rounds. However, 10 rounds is still 30 minutes. That's still 5 minutes longer than a 5-round title fight. So this is going to be something where this is going to be an interesting boxing match. I'm curious to see how they build the card. I'm sure there's going to be some sort of co-promoting here. Obviously, Nate's Real Fight Inc. So Masvidal is it somehow with his Gamebred promotions. I'm sure, I don't know the full extent of those details. I'm sure those are going to get released as we go here. I think this is exciting. I think it's exciting that we're getting the rematch. And I think that it being in a boxing ring suits the rematch even more. Where Nate's older, Jorge's older. All they have to worry about is the boxing. All they have to worry about is throwing hands. The whole camp, all they have to worry about is basically cardio, coming in great condition, and work on their hands the entire time and movement. Now, I will say this. In terms of the elusiveness, we have to give that advantage to Jorge Masvidal. In terms of the fight IQ, the slickness, and the striking, I give it to Masvidal. But with Diaz, it's always the same story. He's going to be there the duration of the fight, most likely. We've only really seen him put away one time by Josh Thompson by head kick. We did see Masvidal put a pretty good beating on him at UFC 244, but overall, I think this is a really, really good matchup for Nate Diaz. And considering he was just in there with Jake Paul, a guy that's way bigger, a guy that hits really, really hard. Like Jake Paul, people can say what they want. Nate was in there and survived against Jake Paul. And look at these guys who are allegedly professional boxers are all getting knocked out in the first round against Jake Paul. So Nate went the distance with him. I feel like going with that bigger guy is going to bode well for Nate coming into this matchup. But I want to hear what you guys think down in the comments. I know the initial reaction is going to be, oh, why isn't this in the UFC? Who cares? It's boxing. They're washed up. They're this or that. Guys, this is exciting. This is a great way for two legends that we all have loved or did like, whatever. You know, I know Masvidal's became a little annoying throughout his career, but overall, these are two guys that have been big names in the UFC that have an opportunity to make a lot of money doing this. They go in there. They don't have to put their full body on the line in terms of the wrestling and all these different things. We're not seeing them go in there with some young, hungry guy in the welterweight division of the UFC. I think this is a fun match. I think this is a fun matchup. I think it's exciting. I want to hear what you all think down in the comments. Like this video, comment your take below, an early prediction. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I appreciate you all. See you next time.